Okay, hopefully you guys can hear me now properly. Uh, Please acknowledge with a message if you can. Can you hear me now? Alright, cool. So some of you are online and on live. So this is going to be like the fifth session. It's basically going to be dealing with sweet. Thank you. This is going to be dealing with the PBR materials and lighting and terrain for Unity. So yeah. So PBR basically stands for physically based rendering. So the materials that you have in general are usually not particularly accurate as such in terms of their representation of what you're trying to show, right? So let's say you're trying to make a metal, it doesn't really look as much as a metal or something, let's say. So that's a common issue that may pop up in a game because you want it to be photorealistic, like it looks like it's actually there, right? But maybe it looks a little cartoony or something. It's like uncanny valley. It just looks a little off. So physically based rendering is basically a technique that is employed in certain game engines so that you can have a more realistic material being applied. So on the screen right now, you can see over here all the materials look pretty dull and, well, dead and pointless. There's no character to it. So let's just try to spice that up. So step one, as you saw, was just you do create, you go to material. Yeah. So on doing that, here I just renamed it to metal. Now, an important thing in Unity is there's two parts to it. There's a material and then there's a shader. So the material name is over here, obviously, and this is a material in the inspector. The shader by default, the one that it picks up is the standard one. That is Unity's own standard shader that is used basically for maintaining a certain amount of consistency between materials. So it doesn't have a jarring difference. Imagine having a, let's say, I don't know if you guys have played which one was that, GTA Chinatown. It's that kind of material, is that style is called cell shading. So imagine having a cell shaded material and then having like a very physically based rendered metal. That would not match the aesthetic one bit. So that's why those would require different shaders. So assuming you use the same shader, you should have a very consistent look. So as of now, the standard shader should be sufficient. So going by that, the main stuff, okay, I'll dump this onto the cube. Okay, you can just do that, right? You can just pick up the material, dump it onto any object. You dump it here, it does that. So as of now, that's what it is. Now, albedo is something that controls the color. I'm pretty sure we discussed this in the first session itself. So albedo discusses the color, controls the color, and as of now it's white. Hold on, when I do that, oh yeah, cool. So it's white right now. So any changes here, as we know, would get reflected in real time. So yeah, pretty simple. You can just put any color you want. Let's just go with teal for now, I guess. Yeah. So that's your albedo. Now you see this little empty square on the side, that basically is for the texture itself that you can apply to the material, which then gets applied to the object. So let's go over here, and okay, the screen will keep popping onto, I'm using like a dual monitor, so I'm sorry, it's confusing. So as of now, let's just take some, okay, yeah, you can see this one, glass stain. This should be in the default package, so you can just select this. Now I selected this. See how that changes in the background? So it applies that particular texture that you put over here in any of these. They're all different functions, of course. And in this case, since I put like a teal color to it, it just puts a layer of that on top of the actual color. So if I go back to white, this is the actual one. I could go back to like a greenish hue or red, anything. Yeah. So that's the texture itself. Now, metallic. For metallic, what would be better is to actually have a light. Just for the sake of it, I'm gonna have like a point light. right there. Right, cool, that's pretty far away. Mm, yeah, cool. This isn't showing very easily, but okay, let's just go with this. Okay, so where's the material? Yeah, here. So you see the material over here, this is your preview, right? So you can control the lighting. So here you see two lights over here. So that's like dual tone shading. So you can see a light on this end and a brighter one on this end. You can switch that to just a single one. So the other side's completely dark. If you do that, reverse, that's it. Different shapes, just go through that. So, okay, metallic. I mean, literally, it controls how metallic the surface looks. Now, what would metallic imply? It implies how, to an extent, it implies how shiny it looks. Not entirely, but kind of. Because that factor is more controlled by the smoothness. Because, see that? Okay? If you control the slider, if you take it to the other extreme, which is zero, right? It looks really, the word you're looking for is matte. It as if it has like micro bumps on the actual surface itself, which is diffusing the light a lot. An example of this would be, I don't know, your eraser, for example. Yeah, it's not reflective at all, right? So it's very similar to this kind of texture. No, I mean, besides this color, of course. Now, and the opposite of that would be some shiny plastic you may have on something. So it just ends up reflecting the light into one little blob like that. See? So that, and now you can basically playing around with the metallicness of a certain object along with the smoothness can give you a very peculiar effect depending on what you're going for actually. Okay, you guys are following, right? Just tell me if I'm going too fast. So you can just play around with this, and again, these are things that there are two approaches to this depending on how you're trying to make a game. Either you could have it be super realistic, in which case you need to know the actual metallic values corresponding to a particular object that has been used by someone earlier and then put it over here, or you just eyeball it. I mean, whatever you look you're going for, the numbers don't really matter that much. Most of the time for indie game devs such as me, we just eyeball it. So you just end up scrolling through it and see whatever's easier for you, depending on what look you're going for, of course. So assuming I just want a black ball that's kind of shiny and still has a little bit of texture like that, see that? It's a shit material, but yeah, that. Source, metallic alpha. So it goes, okay, yeah. So here the rendering mode is opaque, as you can see. Opaque is, I mean, I'm really not going to explain what opaque is. So opaque is opaque. Now, the other one you have is cutout, fade, and transparent. Cutout, when you do this, see what happens? It basically took any of the black parts of this. Hold on, I'll just go to opaque. See the black outline, all of this stuff. It ends up taking that and eliminating it from the actual material itself, leaving only the colored stuff. So it is quite literally cut out. Now on this side, you can only see one side, right? You can't see like the face behind it. Correct? It looks kind of odd, but the reasoning for that is basically all of these materials are only rendered on one surface. So if you switch it to like a plane, okay, you can see it on this end, but on this end you can't see anything, which doesn't really make that much sense to you. But the whole point is you're trying to avoid a certain amount of overhead on the game engine itself so as to make it more lightweight and performant. So that's why it renders only one side of it. There are certain particular shaders. So, okay, this is for the default shader itself, right? You can write or download or use special shaders which will have illumination on both sides. But the standard typical one has lighting only on one and the other side has nothing. So for that same reason, even in this sphere, it has lighting on this end, but the other side just isn't there. Over here also the same. But if you actually go to that material, see, this face exists. It's still there. It's not like it's disappeared. But when you see through it from this direction itself, in this direction actually, in the Z direction, you can't see the back face. Okay? Even though it still exists, as you can clearly see. So that is cut out. Fade, I mean, again, it's similar to cutout, but here you get to control, right? No, you do not get to control. My bad. So that is, yeah. In transparent, what happens is, okay, in opaque, when you select a color, you can control the alpha. Now, RGB is obviously, red, green, blue. It lets you control the color of it. That's what you're varying over here. But all the time, your alpha remains the same, right? So alpha lets you control the transparency. 0 alpha is completely transparent and 255 is completely opaque. But since your rendering mode itself is opaque, it can't recognize, let's say, 140 for example. So for that you have to put it to transparent. When you do that, you see, it's a little bit more transparent. You can see the outlines in the back. Yeah. So you can see the outlines and stuff, right? Behind it. So I could just control the transparency a bit more and drop it down. I mean, it's not a great solution to be honest. That's why most people don't really use this, but it's a thing. So now besides that, let's say we go to fade. That again controlled by your alpha channel. This each of these are channels, okay? So yeah, that's basically your look in materials for albedo at least. So let's just go back to opaque, and instead of this ugly thing, let's put something else. Oh, I have a metal. Excellent. Okay, cool. So okay, so as you can see over here, it has a metal, right? But it has no depth to it. Like it really just looks like a sticker that's just been created and pasted onto this block. There's no depth. There's nothing more to it. So for that, we have normal maps. I'll explain metallic maps. Those are a little annoying. Normal maps. These two, your albedo and normal maps, are like the essentials to making a material look good. You do these two, and let's say 80% of your work is done there itself. So normal maps are any of these images: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Any of these. I honestly have no clue what that color is. Like purple, I guess, violet. I don't know. Any of those. So what the thing is about those colors is, now let's just go back to that metal. Okay, this is my metal, right? This is my albedo image. And once I clicked it, something happened here, which is not completely right. So I click on this. Now see what happens. Actually, hold on. The different metals, the entire texture itself is a little different if you notice it. That is not good. Okay. Okay, it doesn't have to be the same normal to be honest. It could be anything. So, but okay. All right, one thing you could do is you could just select this. Yeah, it'll say this texture is not marked as a normal map. You could generate that texture. Yeah, see, except that texture ended up becoming the albedo also, which is a problem. Looks kind of shit, but okay. Yeah, this works. Okay, this works. See, now even though my albedo is honestly just like what, a white block, it doesn't really matter because wait, hold on. I'll remove the albedo and show it to you. See, there's absolutely no albedo, but just putting a normal map itself gives this a little bit of extra depth. See how the light just bounces off of it? I'm sure the quality is and the video compression is a little messed up. See, okay, yeah, and it might not be too visible for you guys, but see how it looks so much more lifelike? Like, even though at this angle, it picks up a little bit of the light on the edges over here. So it just makes it significantly more realistic in terms of materials. That's basically what my point was, that albedo and normal map is your main stuff. Uh, so that honestly, this is, you covered like 80% of material stuff right here. Now, besides that, let's say metallic maps. I could go to anything to be fair, but let's just go back to the normal map. It'll look terrible, I think. Oh no, it's pretty okay. Yeah. Usually you can literally use any of these images, okay? I mean, there's honestly no control. That depends on what, as per usual, it depends on what you're looking for. Explaining each and every one of them again would be an absolute nightmare, so I would suggest experimenting as much as possible. So let's just go with the metal again. Right. So you see how the part of it that's protruding out, like these portions are slightly shinier than this portion. This looks a little dull. That is the effect of the metallic texture that you ended up putting on it. Again, you can still control the smoothness over here. So see how it changes? Yeah. So this is the very, I don't know, ugly, dull looking metal. Let's say it's kind of worn out, right? That's what it kind of looks like. Let's say you have a really fresh metal and it's still kind of a little dusty, but you know, it has a proper separation between the top surface and this lower ridges and stuff. So again, controlled by metallic. And this doesn't have to be a normal image. It can, as I said, be anything. It could be the Unity logo image for all you care. See? So that white part of it, the unity part, this entire thing, the entire texture is white, right? So that got converted into black over here because that's made very, very reflective, but doesn't diffuse at all. So here, see how it looks super duper shiny over here, this section, but it's really kind of dull over here. Anyway, so my point being, you could literally use anything, doesn't honestly matter. Height map, again, I'll just end up using the normal map. It's a bad idea, but anyways. Height map. Okay, so what a height map does is, I mean, it's honestly most of this is pretty self-explanatory, but a height map gives you height and depth. So as you move this, just look at the edge and this portion of the actual image as I scroll through this. See how it changes a little bit, or you can see it a little better over here actually. See how that goes. See, now that's really up, like all of these things are on top and this surface is at the bottom. As you raise it, it turns into the inverse, like this portion's kind of sunken down and this portion's on top. So this kind of controls the effect of depth that you end up getting out of the actual image, texture and the material. Yeah, again, play around with it as required to reach whatever look you're reaching for. Occlusion. Okay, in occlusion, basically, right. So you have cracks and crevices in certain places, right? Here, it's not particularly well demonstrated, but you could have cracks in a, I don't know, asphalt. I do not know if I have the asphalt texture over here. Nope, I don't. Yeah, I don't. Okay, so that kind of makes it trickier. But anyways, you could have cracks and crevices and stuff, right? And sometimes the light doesn't really get into each crack. So what you do is you end up putting an occlusion map, which basically is just black and white. And see, it basically ends up putting shadows for all intents and purposes. That's all it does. It's putting shadows. That's not a very good, I mean, it's not a very accurate description of it, but it's good enough to understand, I'd say. So in this case, it's just some random aircraft thingy I picked up. So let's just say I put a lock. See, it darkened the entire image because I have a feeling it's being spread across everything. So it darkens all of it. But I mean, it gives it a nice grunge look, you know. Anyways, let's go with white. Nope. This, maybe this. Okay, yeah, that kind of works. Okay, see, this white portion of it is here and the rest of the black is right here. See, the black, I mean, obviously corresponds to the black and white to white. So again, very goal dependent items. It's not much you can explain. Occlusion is something, I mean, it's more of an afterthought to be honest, because as you can scale it back up and down, you can see. Maybe I have an occlusion. Yeah, this is an occlusion map. Yeah, exactly. So this is an occlusion map for a different character, but the point being that they're basically just outlines and the slight amounts of shading. It's pre-baked shadows. Now, what's baking? I'll explain. It's not the one that you're thinking of. It's slightly different. So this is your occlusion as of now. So that's that. Now, emission. Emission converts this thing into a glowing lamp. Basically, yeah. It looks like a pretty shit lamp, but yeah. Now, the issue, as you may be able to see, I'll just turn off the skybox for a moment. Yeah. Cool. This is technically a material that is emitting light, right? But it doesn't actually affect any of the lighting around it. So there's a reason for that because there's an entire lighting tab over here. Actually, knowing you guys, you probably have a different interface. So you'll have to go to Window. Over here you have General. Nope. Rendering. Yeah, lighting settings. That's this. You go to Window, Rendering, lighting settings. That's your tab. My layout's a little different, so you might get confused. So that's that. So I've turned off the skybox material. Yeah. So this emissive material should technically affect this environment, right? So there's something called baking and light mapping. So that's this entire section. I'll explain that in a moment. For now, we'll just go back to the material. So yeah, I mean, obviously you can just do this, whatever color, typical. And as I said, for illumination, you could have it either baked or real time. Real time, as far as I understand, does not work. See, what the reason? Honestly, no clue. But yeah, that's really the case. I don't know. Because most of the time, when you use a material and you expect that material to affect the surroundings, you tend to end up baking the entire thing. So I haven't used real time before with a material like this. So as of now, we leave it on baked. Here also, as you can see here, you can just put any texture. I mean, yeah. Wherever you see that block, that's basically for textures. Oh, nice greenery. So that. Then what else? Normal map. Okay, these are secondary maps. They are just used for adding a slight bit of extra polish to your material. So let's say I want a carbon fiber look on this. I put that. See? See how this gets that, I don't know, carbon fiber is not supposed to be hexagonal, but anyways. It has a hexagonal look, and here you can control the strength. You can control it over here also. I'm sorry, I didn't mention that earlier. Uh, this needs to be very subtle, so I'll just drop it down to something like, I guess, 0.3. So you can still kind of see it. And tiling and offset. Offset means you can move the texture, either X offset or Y offset. Simple stuff. Tiling, since each of these hexagons are too large, tile it to, let's say, 5 by 5, I guess. Yeah, makes it much more subtle and low-key, but still adds character to the entire material, you know. This one I'd like to strengthen a little bit more. Yeah, so that's our metal of some sort. Yeah, so that's that. See, actually this gives it a very nice view. All of these white portions are really shiny, and this stuff ends up being super dull. Now that's something that can be controlled by smoothness. See, you drop it down to 0, really matte, and as you increase it, metallicness increases. This is controlled by your metallic texture, whatever you end up putting. Let's say I put this. Okay, that looks terrible. This. Yeah, excellent. So this white portion ends up becoming super reflective, and your black outside part becomes super matte. See? Reflective and really matte. So yeah, that's honestly that's just most of materials. Just play around with it and try to understand. If you have any doubts, just put it up on the live stream. So yeah, that's that. I would suggest not messing with any of these because I mean it's a nightmare. Reflections, I mean common sense controls reflections. Not in the way that you may be thinking. Again, as I said, better not to mess around with it. Specular highlights is what you're kind of going for when you mean reflections, but yeah, it's slightly tricky. Wouldn't mess with that to be honest. So that. Now going back to emission as we were, right? So in lighting, we have the following things. Now you have a skybox, right? Skybox is what you see over here. I mean, as a sky. So there's a built-in skybox over here, which is at this. Yeah, that's a skybox that you have. If you look around, not here, you might see. Yeah, cool. See, you can see a skybox. You can see a sun. That's your skybox. This skybox itself tends to be a source of lighting. See, environment lighting, source is skybox. So you could just control your intensity of the lighting from the actual skybox itself. Since the skybox is slightly bluish, you can see it has a slight bluish tint to it. In this case, it's a procedural skybox apparently, so it means you can mess around with it. Okay. Depending on your settings, you should also have the ability to do this. So actually, let's not mess with that. I'll go with atmosphere thickness. So let's say more of a sunset kind of vibe. Yeah. So as you can see how it's slightly orangish. And now I switch back to this and I control this. Now it takes a while, right? I can switch there and then it takes a split second to do this. That's because every time you can see at the bottom it's doing something. Just go through that, see? It says preparing bake. So what it does every single time is, I'll just go back to blue. What it does every single time is it has to bake the entire setting itself. Now, what's baking? Baking is the process where it ends up tracing each one of these lights, each path of the light, and accordingly how it affects the environment. So in point lights itself, you have real time versus mixed and baked, right? So let's say you have baked, for example. It doesn't affect it in real time, clearly. So you can move it around, it doesn't really do anything. Put it back to real time, and it actually does. So let's suppose we keep this at mixed, right? Actually, no, not mixed. Just keep it at baked. I'll copy this and just paste it just to have another type that's actually real time. So we have a real time one and we have a baked one. So yeah, as I said, environment lighting, skybox, you can control the intensity. Usually better not to mess with it, but it gives it a source of ambient lighting, you know. If you remove this completely, it looks really, really dull. So, or yeah, of course, you could just select a color that you want. Ouch. You could select the color you want instead of picking it from the skybox itself. Issue being it doesn't really always match, so it's not suggested as much. Gradient again, of course, you understand gradients. But yeah, better to just have the skybox. Environment reflections, again, reflections. Just like lighting, you have the reflections coming from the skybox. Resolution. Do not go for anything psychotic like 2048, 2048. That's just excessive because most of the games that you play, these are all secondary aspects. They're not actually stuff that affects the player himself, not something he's going to notice on a regular basis. So just keep it at a relatively low amount. It's fine. Anything lesser than that is a bit less, and beyond 256 is just pushing it for no reason. Intensity for the actual reflections and stuff. See, you remove that. Any of the lighting coming from the skybox itself doesn't affect this anymore because of the intensity multiplier. So that bounces, keep it at one bounce because it's tracing each and every single one of the paths. So depending on how up to date you guys are, you may know about the what is it called? NVIDIA's RTX. So those are like real-time ray tracing graphics cards, right? So they have to trace individual paths. They have particular hardware that allows them to do it in a much more streamlined and faster manner. Here, instead, it's not as fast. So I wouldn't suggest going to some bonkers thing like 5 and 6. Just leave it at 1. These are, as I said, very secondary items, not particularly important. Real-time global lighting is something I personally haven't really understood well enough, so I wouldn't mess around with it. But from my understanding, all of this stuff would affect your movement of the character in real time. There's no harm in keeping it on, but usually it's suggested that you keep either one of these on, but not both. So I'm turning this off. Bake GI. Okay, global illuminations baked in this case. So lighting mode, shadow mask, they have their differences, but by default shadow mask is the case. I honestly don't, I'm not particularly well versed with the other two options because I haven't had to use it. Shadow mask seems to be sufficient for most of the use cases. Now, the important stuff, light mapping settings. So what you have to do is step one being, we probably need more parts. We'll just end up putting a few more shapes, yeah. None of this would make sense without shapes. Just extend that, maybe rotate it a bit. Sure, why not? Yeah, something else. Cool. So you can see this gets affected by that real-time light I ended up putting over here, but there's also a bake light over here that's not really doing anything. Right, so we have one object that is technically the player himself that can be moved, and there's one object that's part of the environment that cannot be moved. So what we do is, step one, we go over here and we select this. So what this does is it makes this object static. Right, so you see this? See this? Yeah. So the moment you make it static, it means that it's not going to move. Now, in this case, static can mean the following things. It can be static with reference to reflection probes, which control, reflections. Like these two, I don't honestly know. Batching is basically a procedure where all the materials with sorry, every object in your game with the same material gets drawn at the same time by the GPU or your CPU, depending on what you're running on. So it's static to that, it's static to occlusion, it's static to the light map, and in this case, everything. So we do that. Now, in this case, the light mapper can be either CPU or GPU. This is in preview, it's a nightmare, don't mess with it. Bad idea. Once it starts working, I'll explain it. And this won't happen for a while. So as of now, just use the progressive CPU. Prioritize view. So this means that whatever view exists in this game mode, it'll do that first, it'll end up mapping that first, and then the other corners that are still existing in this region. Direct samples. Now this is the actual number of samples that it takes directly, as in the light source ends up sending, let's say 32, I mean that's not accurate, but assume it to send like 32 light rays in all those directions, and it calculates it on the basis of that. Indirect is when those bounce off. So the bounces are considered really high over here. I'm sure my PC is not supremely capable of handling such excessive stuff, so I'll just keep it on 128 for now. But yeah, bounces are another thing. As I said, don't go for super high values. 1 and 2 should be sufficient. Filtering, bad idea. Leave it at auto. Light map resolution. Now each one of these ends up making a light map. See, this is your light map. So over here, there's only one item that I've named as static as of now, which is this. So this is basically its light map. It has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 faces for some reason. I have no clue, but yeah, it doesn't make sense. Uh, right. So these basically what this does is this is an image, right? It's literally an image. One second, you can see it here. See, this is what you see. These are the 6 faces basically. So what you're looking at right now is the lighting that you see over here converted into a 2D image. So you basically unfold this box into this. It takes a while to wrap your head around it, but it's pretty simple to be honest. So yeah, that's that. So yeah, okay, let's see. Now let's say I end up putting another cube, just for an example, somewhere here. I rotate this to cool. It's not too sure. Yeah. So this one, okay, if I didn't keep this as static, okay, see, it has nothing over here. It doesn't, nothing shows up. But if I end up putting it as static over here, it becomes light map static and then it bakes its own light map. So now it's getting affected by the lighting over here. Actually, not the lighting over here, it gets affected by this, since this is baked. Now, if you turn this off, actually no, 1 second. Turn this to baked. Recalculates everything. Right. Okay. Okay, cool. So now that this is done, right? I can no, bad idea. Let this be. So you can see it right over here. Maybe I can just make this a bit brighter so it's more evident. Oh fuck no, my bad. Yeah, okay. I'll explain precisely what I'm trying to do. Okay, yeah, cool. See, now it shows up. Okay, you can see like it's just like a blob over here, right? I'll zoom in, but it's gonna break down. Okay, you can see that it's really sharp over here, the lighting, and the rest of it is pretty dark, right? Now, this is this cube. This cube is static as of now. Over here, when you have your scene, there's an auto generating. So as you make changes, it just keeps generating a light map repeatedly. Not particularly great if you don't have a powerful CPU, PC. So just turn it off for now. So now I know that it's ended up generating this light map. Okay, open preview. You can see this. This is the portion. This is your part over here. So you see how it's getting cut off by at some point, which is basically this surface or this edge actually. Yeah. So as I said, it converts this into a two-dimensional map. So at this point, if I end up converting this into a non-static object, it still remains. Let's say I turn off the light source itself over here. Okay, it still remains, which doesn't make sense, right? If there's no light, how do you have this thing? That's because it's been baked. So what it does is by baking, it ends up creating that one texture. It creates this texture and it saves it onto this object itself. So even though the light's gone in this case and I've turned off that it's not static also anymore. Where's it gone? Yeah. Even though it's not static anymore, it still shows up. Like, since it's not static, it won't show me the texture over here. But as you can see, it's still there, clearly. That's because I've turned off the auto generation part. If I end up clicking this, it'll regenerate and it'll realize there's no light source. So, no highlight. That is it. That's your lighting, basically. Using all of these, you can make it as beautiful as you want. You could have, I don't know, cylinders that have emissive materials on it so that you then bake it and then convert it into a tube light for all I know. I mean, you could do anything. Just going by that as an example, let's turn off the skybox because that's actually I'll just turn on the light from it. Yeah, better. So you have a cylinder, let's say. Actually, hold on. Just make like a really super basic scene just so you guys get the point, right? Hopefully it won't take too long. Right. Yeah, see, again, as I said, it only renders one part of it, only one face of it. So, oh good lord, what am I doing? Right, so another thing you need to know is, and something I forgot, are normals. So the reason it shows this surface and not this surface is because this surface has a thing called a normal. As you know, a normal is basically telling which direction that surface is pointing in. In this case, that normal is literally in this arrow's direction. It's in this direction. So it only calculates the lighting for that normal. This side doesn't have a normal, so it doesn't calculate any of the lighting, allowing you to see through it. When you use special shaders, it ends up accounting for the normal on this side also. But most of the time, it's not very accurate, so it doesn't look that great. Just some random trivia, not particularly important. And go on this side. That's also why I'm not just making a box and then just scaling it up, because all of the normals are facing outwards. So if I try to look inside, you can just see through it. So if you do cube and you try to make it really, really massive, just make it 50-50. See, I can still see the sky, even though this cube is clearly, I'm inside the cube, which doesn't make sense, obviously. So let's just delete that now. I have the two planes there. Just make another one. 0, 0. Just give me a second, because it'll make sense once it actually happens. Okay, I guess it should be fine now. Kind of, not really. It looks pretty shit. I'll just turn off the skybox itself completely. And now it's orange for some reason. Okay, this is terrible. Yeah, so ambient color by default was orange for some reason. Now, yeah, I have most of these planes. Just taking the last one, going back to 0, 0. Actually, no, this had to be 90. Rotate it around. It's 90. Yeah, cool. It's a terrible showcase, but yeah. So the only reason you're seeing anything is because of this directional light. You turn it off, it's black. So actually, just drop the power down to something like 1.1. No, very little. Cool. So now you have the cylinder over here. You can rotate the cylinder, make it go to 90, down to 0. Right. Now we make an actually emissive material. We just take a standard material, just leave it. You can name it later, doesn't really matter. Drop it onto this. I make it emissive, and I make it white. Right. So by default, since the baking is off, it's still on auto generate. Now, the issue, as I said, you'd think that it makes sense, right? You have the material over here, it says baked over here, and it should pop up. Even though auto generates on, it's not doing that. As I said, you have to really mention that the objects are going to be static, so that the thing knows while calculating that none of these things are actually going to move, and they're static, and it doesn't cause any discrepancies to pop up later on. So when you do that, whoops, and you select static, it ends up calculating the thing, and eventually you get, yeah, see, that's why I said your PC has to be pretty powerful to do light mapping. You can probably hear my laptop's fan kicking in, and that looks pretty shit. I do not know why. Turn this off. Oh god, it's doing it again. Good lord. HDR, right? Okay, so I can increase the intensity. Let's see, this might work. So we have the cylinder, we have all of these being static, and we have this. How do I clear the data? Clear big data. Ta-da! It looks terrible. It doesn't even show up. I don't know what's going wrong. Good lord. Wait, hold on. Let's go for the light. Okay, a point light is clearly showing up. But that's because it's real time, so no shit, obviously. But if I make this baked and I make it static, generate it now. Oh boy, yeah, okay. I think it's doing its job. There you go. Excellent. That looks miserable. See how you can see each of these blocks? Like actual, I don't know, Minecraft like versions of it. Yeah, that's because you have to up all of these settings. You have to increase the direct samples, indirect samples, leave the bounces, that's not that important. Definitely increase the light map resolution and keep the padding at this. Okay, see, just for an example, I'll show you. I'll just double almost all of it. So, very bad idea if you don't have a powerful PC. I'm telling you, my, I've, I mean, several of my laptops have frozen and PCs. So, yeah, so it shouldn't look as blocky, but I'm pretty sure it's still going to look really blocky at the end of this. Yeah, so you see that noise, it's basically it's tracing out individual light rays from that point forward. And this might take forever. Okay, so do you guys have any doubts as of now? Just dump it in the chat room or whatever. I can clear that out. Because besides this, it's just terrain, and terrain's pretty chill. Yeah, so as I said, just increasing the settings up to a slight amount ends up slowing down the entire damn thing this much. And beware, it's a gaming laptop, by the way. It's supposed to handle stuff that's powerful, but clearly not. Anyway, screwed. Point being, that's what it is. Baking stuff is a nightmare, and I pity you if you do it, but it's really important to get the aesthetics right. So yeah, it still looks blocky, but okay, to be fair, I cut it off earlier. You see the grain on top? Like, I don't know if you can see it because of the compression. It's pretty noisy over here. That's because I didn't let it run and then do its automatic denoising and stuff. So yeah, that's your terrain. Looks pretty terrible, and honestly the exact opposite of my actual work. But anyways, I can boast slightly at least. So we go out of this, we go to this, and we delete this. Actually, for all intents and purposes, I delete this also. Easy. So what we do now is turn on the directional light first, and then so that's your materials and lighting. Won't real time be better than baking? Yeah. So Jagdish, good question. Real time would be better than baking it 99% of the time. Issue being real time, trying to do real time with, I don't know, 5,000 lights is very bad. Like your PC, your engine, nothing can handle it. It's a nightmare. So usually what you do is for let's say if you build up a scene, right? Actually, I could search for it and then show it to you. If you build up any scene, it's easier to just bake that kind of lighting in and just put 2 or 3 lights that can simulate your shadows and stuff. Because of that, you don't have to calculate the lighting for every single thing. Understood? So, one second, actually, I'm just trying to get any game which has a particular setting I'm looking for. Give me a second. Yeah, actually this kind of works, right? Alright, you can see this. This is Fear 3. Just an example, of course. So in this case, this guy's in like a corridor, right? Or a hallway, even in this case. So here you don't, I mean, okay, there's going to be several light sources, right? Here, okay, there's clearly some sort of sunlight coming in this direction. There seems to be a torch at this end which is going, pointing onto this. There's all of these televisions, so that's like 3, 7, 8, 9, 10, some smaller stuff here. At least 20, 30 things inside this scene itself, trying to make it look nice. Having 30 real-time lights that are contributing to the shadows and all that stuff is okay, to be honest, not that bad, but depending on how you scale your scene, it might get really bad really fast. So in this case, there's only two actual lights that need to cast a shadow, right? And need to interact with the environment in real time, which is the light that's coming from here, that's following over here, because as you move, that needs to move, right? These shadows. It's not uh, imagine the baking to be basically printing of this outline onto a certain object. If you can move, then this light wouldn't make sense, right? If I'm standing, let's say, there, I don't want that on my machine or my gun. So that has to be real time. This overhead light source will have to be real time, and this torch that you have over here has to be real time. The rest of them can all be baked. That takes resources off. But even baking will freeze the PC, so why is no, buddy, baking freezes the PC when you're making it, but when you actually start playing the game, it doesn't do anything. It's not freezing the PC as such, it does really slows it down because we as standard people don't really have extremely powerful PCs. When you start developing it, once you actually make the game, it doesn't have to recalculate every single time. It's saved as an image. So that little part you saw over here, that square, that is the image. I think I cleared all of it, right? Okay, yeah, this stuff. It's stored as literally an image. That's it. So it's not recalculated in every single game. Whereas in real time, it has to be calculated again and again and again every time you move. So that's why this is usually better in the long term, of course. But most of us are impatient and we just end up putting a lot of real times. So yeah, anyways. So yeah, if any other doubt, you can just ask. So that's your material and lighting. We'll just go to terrain now. So right click 3D object and you have terrain over here. Now, fair warning, I am not particularly experienced with terrain because it is a nightmare and Unity's terrain system is very, very terrible. So I would strongly recommend against using it, because if you're actually going to make a terrain, just make it in a 3D model and import it. It's much, much smarter. But now that I'm teaching you this, let's just go with it. So this is your terrain, that's your surface. It looks pretty flat, not fun. So what you can do is you have these following options clearly. Terrain collider. So as you had box collider, you had sphere collider, etc. You have terrain collider. The benefit with terrain is you can actually just paint out whatever you want. So I click that, and this is not something paint texture. Yeah, this is the usual. So yeah, pretty much like a shitty version of paint. You can just select whatever you want as a texture over here. I'll go with a bubbles. Let's go with bubbles. And brush size is this, opacity is this, and terrain layer. So now I draw, and it does nothing. Why is it doing nothing? Okay, raise. Okay, there you go. Left click to raise. Yeah, cool. Okay, see, oh, it shows you a preview. I mean, this really just shows you that I haven't used it in ages. It's pretty shit. It looks decent, but I mean, if you can 3D model in other software, it looks significantly better. So I mean, I don't find this useful at all. So yeah, you have brush size, which is, I mean, no shit, brush size. Opacity ends up controlling its strength. You take it 100 and see these weird spiky crap, and if you drop it down a lot, it's barely even visible. Keep it there somewhere, and you draw. That is very bad looking, so I'll drop it down. And okay, see, if you hold it down, it just keeps raising it up, 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 and up. See, and moving. So what you do is like just squiggle around. Clearly you can just use different textures over here. See, as you draw the texture, you can make all kinds of material. Now this section looks terrible, so hold shift and left click to lower is what I'm going to do. So I'm going to do this and flatten that entire thing out. It looks abysmal, but yeah, now it's better. See, yeah, I should just make the opacity much higher, drop it down completely. Yeah, cool. So what else? You could just do the squiggly thing, large, raise it up. Okay, I think I drowned my other item. There we go. Yeah, cool. Keep that guy up there. So yeah, that's that. You can just fiddle around as usual and make all kinds of things. So paint texture, smooth height. Yeah, this is for, I mean, smoothing it. Again, depends on your opacity. Pretty high and it smooths it immediately. And very low means just keep doing it again and again and again. That's that. Not particularly fun to be honest, but yeah. You can create a new brush over here depending on the texture that you may already have. So let's say you want like a Grand Canyon kind of thing. I have no clue what would look good for that. Wait, let's go with this. Terrible idea, but okay. This, okay. Shrink it down and increase opacity. Oh, that does absolutely nothing. Do how about this? Actually, no. I think a black and white something would be better. Yeah, this would be better. It isn't. Oh wait, hold on, dumbass. I'm doing smooth height. My bad. Yeah. Okay. So this would work. Clearly not how I want it to, but it does work. It would work. So yeah, you can import your own brushes into it, and that's the thing. You could have it really messed up and like squiggly and pretty. As you can see, it's not very smooth right on top. So just take a simpler thing like this, drop the opacity a little higher, increase this, and go to smooth height, and just go over it, brush over it. So it just smooths out most of it. So you could just play around with that. Terrain's basically just that, to be honest. Now the thing is, because you have a terrain collider over here, see, terrain data is your terrain itself. Once you play, you should technically recognize all of these surfaces as a movable item, which it does not, because I don't know why. That is very odd. Why is that so? Just a second. Box collider, lift it. He doesn't seem to be using. Oh yeah, wait. It's using transform, right? Okay, cool, cool. Just a second. You end up putting a rigid body. Gravity, masses. Just raise it up to 5. Cool. And increase the speed to like 20. They should interact with the. Yeah, excellent. See. Whoa. Okay, shit. That's really trippy. Fuck, 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 fuck. Okay, and it fell through the surface. So yeah, it can interact with the terrain itself. Bro, when you try to use height map for terrain, it asks for raw image. Height map for terrain. It didn't really ask for a raw image for me, buddy. I don't know what it's doing for you. See, height map for terrain. See, smooth height. I can literally just pick up any of these. None of these are raw. See, PNG, PNG, PSD, TTF. I have no clue why it's asking you for a raw. I honestly don't know. Just check it out again. Like any of these, I mean, all of these. Okay, not neighbor trees. It it should by default accept anything. TGA, okay, PNG, anything should be fine. I don't know why it's asking you for raw. Just check the settings again. So yeah, as I said, terrain collider, and you have a cube with a rigid body, so you can do all kinds of weird shit, as you just saw. See, it's pretty fun. Whoa. Oh shit. Okay, okay. I might get a headache. So yeah, that's your terrain basically. So there's another thing you can do with terrain. You have trees. I have really not worked with trees before. Like ever. I've used terrains at least, but trees, nope. So as of now, when you do that, you should get this, right? So when you do that, okay, there seem to be some default settings over here for trees. You can pick up anything, to be honest. So I have a tree. Actually, I'll pick something everyone would have. I'll just pick up a box. Should work, hopefully. And I'll add it. Let's see. Excellent. See? So you have a brush size, you have the density of the tree, you have its height, you have the tree's height itself randomized. Okay, it's actually okay. Cool, cool. In this case, do this, drop the density down, and start spreading. See? In this case, it's because I ended up putting the cube as a tree. Obviously, it's not a tree. We want a tree. So we select a tree. Yeah, the drawback with that, just a split second. As you can see, that's a lot of trees. So let's just erase those trees for now and increase the size. Yeah. Drop down the density a little bit, and I'll just spread it. One more click and one more click. So on doing this, you can, as you can see clearly, control its rotation. You can lock its width and height. Actually, I don't want to lock its width and height. Screw it. Mess around with it. You want to randomize it a bit more. Do this. What is it? Cool. So you do that, and you have yourself a very crappy looking forest actually. Yeah, I know the camera is terrible. That's because this game really wasn't meant for this, and it fell through again. Okay, now as you can see, it's fallen through it twice. So the issue is that the terrain collider that you have is generated depending on the mesh that it has, depending on the terrain itself. It's not particularly great. As in, if your object's moving too fast, maybe, I mean, you can control it over here. Instead of having collision discretely, have it continuous. This should help, if I'm not wrong. But it can still always cause problems. Oh my god, okay. Well, it hasn't fallen through yet, so I guess it's doing its job well. Oh, it fell through. See? My point being, it makes it a little better, but not that good, so usually I wouldn't suggest that. So that's mostly what it is. Yeah, you basically gotten terrain. You got, actually, where's that material I ended up making? Shit, where'd it go? Material. Okay, yeah, wait, I'll just search for it. Metal. Oh, I made a lot of metals. Okay. Oh, okay, okay, cool. You can paint details onto it. I have no clue what that is. Yeah, here you should be able to select the material at least. No, that's a resolution. Light map is again calculation based. Grass tint is something else. Material. There you go. Right. So that's a terrible material, but I'm just turning with shaders which need tangent geometry on. Ah, okay, fine. Screw it. Okay. It's functional, but it looks terrible. It has its own reasons. So now that it's being spread over a very large area, let's just shrink it by saying, like, I don't know, 25, I guess. Try to import a PNG image and use it. I will do that, buddy. Just give me a split second. Yeah, so as you can see, you can use other materials as well. It looks ugly, but so does everything else. Yeah, you can do that. So that's that. You learn terrain stuff. You got material stuff, and the next session will basically deal with shaders and stuff. So in this case, I ended up in every single one of these, it's using a standard shader, right? Standard, 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 standard. So in the next session, we'll end up dealing with the more advanced version of shaders to get certain effects like a dissolving effect or like holograms or like a shield that you see in Apex Legends or something like that. So yeah, that's basically it. If you guys have any doubts, just ask me and I'll clear that up now. Okay, let's try a PNG image issue. Um, Oops. Okay, let's. Alright, cool. So let's just try it. This is a JPEG, but might work because it's kind of mossy surface. I'm dealing with. Okay, I can just drag and drop it. Let's drop it in textures. Went through. That's here. Default 2D input, blah blah blah. This is fine. Yeah, all of it's fine. One sec. Okay, fine. That's okay. Now, if you use this and you try terrain, also show how to make rivers. Yeah, rivers would basically just be the reverse of that. You would have to end up putting this. You end up using paint texture. You put the appropriate texture over here. In this case, it's metal because I don't know why. One second. Should be able to change it. Hold on. And why can I not change that? Selected material. Material. Oh, the one you end up putting here. Okay. Suppose I put this. Shit, that looks terrible. Why? No, that's shader editing. Well, okay, anyway, step one would be to lower the terrain anyways. So suppose you want to go through that. What you do first is end up removing the trees over there. So you go here, you have to erase the trees in the path of the river. So suppose it's this path, I guess. Yeah. Then you end up going to lower terrain and increase the opacity to pretty high with this and drop it down completely. And tada, you've made a river. It looks ugly, but now what you have to do is, the thing is, it's just a process of refining it. You just have to do it again and again and again. So drop down the size, drop down the opacity, take the edge, and then you have to smooth it out. And just for a certain amount of consistency, keep it a little rough here and there at the edges. Some of it smooth it out a lot. Then again, raise height, raise it here and there, make it a little more random. One sec. Drop the opacity more and size a bit more. Yeah. Like that's how you do it basically, to be honest. Just drop it down, smooth it out again, little more. No, it's too less. Oh shit, what am I doing? Oh, okay, my bad, my bad. I was pressing the shift and doing it. So smooth it out, and then go to lower terrain again. Lower it, drop the opacity again, and then go through it. See, looks like a much more believable river in this on this side at least. Once you smooth it out a bit more again, right? Looks a little more realistic over here compared to just like carving an entire path through it. That looks man-made. Shouldn't the height map be black and white? It is suggested that it be black and white, but it's not necessary. You can use other colors also. Most of the time, black and white tends to make it easier for you because it makes the distinction easier. See, there you go, a river. It's pretty shit, but yeah, you have a river. How you end up adding materials and water, that depends on a different shader. What you could do is have a separate plane over here. Suppose you actually want moving water through it, right? You could have a separate material here, or have a plane that goes across it. Oh boy, one sec. Yeah, see, have a plane that goes across it, and then there you go. See, because that ends up being a slightly more accurate representation of the water table itself. See, assume you end up getting something blue. Oh, I do have water basic. Nice. Oh, cool. Right, so let's just scale it up a bit more. Okay, yeah, this way you could make some island-like thing actually. Yeah, shit. It looks kind of island-like. See, it has like a river at this point, but yeah. So you could do all these kinds of things. Went through the water and it's gonna fall through. It didn't. No, it did. Shit. So yeah, you can make rivers. And your PNG issue still didn't pop up to me, buddy, so I have no clue what you're doing. As you saw, I just imported that random ass image into textures. This one. Okay. I go to terrain for the same height map. Okay. You go to new one. I don't know what. Yeah, okay. It was this one, right? Yeah, it was this one. Select this. Select this. See, it by default, yes, I mean it would be better if it's black and white, but here in this case it converts it to black and white either ways, so it doesn't really matter all that much. So yeah, I have cliff height as a default texture here. Cool, I could just use that, and then I could use that to smooth things out as need be, or I could just use that to raise and lower stuff again as required. So yeah, that's that. Actually, fuck, terrains are way more nicer than I thought. But still, it's just usually better to model it out in a different software. So yeah, that's that. And if you guys have any doubts, you can just hit me up. And see you guys next session, I guess. Bye.